Hello and welcome. This video is my part 2 of my Ship of Magic character videos. Part 1 was mainly Kyle and Wintro and a little bit of Vivacia because she is a main character. This one will be more the Vestrit women, Ronica, Althea, Kefria, and Malta. There will be major spoilers for Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, book 1 of the Liveship Traders Trilogy. I can't say it. The Liveship Traders Trilogy. Tongue twister. I'm going to start with Ronica, the matriarch of the Vestrit family. And I mentioned this when I did my wrap-up for the previous month when I read Ship of Magic, that when I read this a long time ago, I related more to the younger women, specifically Althea. Young, unmarried, not a mom, she was the one I resonated with. Now that I'm older and I have children, I can see a lot more from Ronica's perspective. She has lived a lot of life and gone through a lot of things. Ronica is part of the old trader generation. She is kind of used to being in charge as she has come up through her womanhood. The traditions around how women are treated have changed and evolved a little bit. I think it was Ephraim's grandmother who bought Vivacia in the first place. So 3 generations back, the women had a very different, more independent, more in charge role in their family. Now, the new traders coming in, having the woman be able to stay home and not have to do anything is a sign of wealth and prestige, and Ronica is kind of in the middle of those 2 generations. Ronica is very well familiar with the price of their relationship with the Rain Wilders, and very familiar with just the price of life as a woman. She lost all 3 of her boys 20 years prior to the start of this book. Part of her life as a woman and parent is never knowing whether a pregnancy will end up as a human. Doesn't go over that much in the first book, but that could make it really hard to even be excited to have a kid. She does want the children she has to be happy. She wants them to succeed. She wants her daughters to be able to marry for love. She believes that that is what Kefria has done. She would prefer that for Althea, despite the fact that it might be helpful to marry them off to people who could help them financially. The thought of basically selling her daughters for money does not make her feel very good. I love how Robin Hobb makes us feel for characters right away. So the Ship of Magic has a lot of exposition. There's a lot of character introduction because there were so many characters. But when Ronica was being introduced, I felt for her immediately. She's sitting there by her sick and dying husband, really trying to cling to her anger about the situation. Because anger is easier than grief. She's trying not to pre-grieve. She knows now, watching him, he's not gonna make it. And at one point she catches herself thinking about when he's gone and she doesn't have to sit by his sickbed anymore, and boy, that racks her with guilt. She really, really loves him still. She had dreamt of a year of him being home. Her dream was that they would finally be in a financial situation where he didn't have to leave for months at a time. He could hire a captain to go for him, maybe Althea when she gets to the right age, and he could stay with her for an entire turning of the seasons. She got her year, but not the way she wanted. And Ronica, in this difficult position, she does make the decision to pass the ship and the inheritances down to Kefria. Kefria is the oldest. It's traditional, it makes sense, it's okay, but for her, control is a little hard to let go of. She's used to being the matriarch and making the decisions for everyone. She never really saw Kefria as being the stronger of her 2 daughters, and Kefria immediately passes all authority that was given to her over to her husband, Kyle. And it does not take very long for Kyle to start showing his true colors, and Ronica is now second guessing what they have done to Althea. That is her daughter. She loves her. This is not how it was supposed to be. And now she doesn't have her big, strong captain husband at her side to do it all with her. And Althea, that character that I felt like I related to the first time I read this, I did not feel like I related to her that much this time. She is a strong and independent woman. She wants to be able to make her own decisions. She wants the freedom of the seas. She wants to be confident in her own abilities and to be respected for not her Vestrit name, but for what she is capable of doing. I can get all that. Oh, but Althea's 19 and I am not 19 anymore. Althea gets hurt pretty deeply in this book. She grew up on Vivacia. She spent a lot of her last voyage bonding personally with Vivacia before Vivacia even woke up. And she fully expects to inherit Vivacia when her father passes. What she doesn't think is going to be so soon. I think it's probably really unfortunate that Althea and Kyle sailed together that last time without Ephron. It gave them a really good chance to hate each other, trapped on a ship for months, getting to see the worst side of each other. Althea has no respect for Kyle. She sees him as incompetent. It hurt her to walk into her father's office on the ship and see it in shambles because of his messiness. He's nothing like her father. That immediately makes her not like him as much. But also she's seen what kind of captain he is. She feels that she is more competent than him, and he gets what she not only wanted, but expected to have. He even gets the authority to say that she can't come back on the ship, which huge mistake on his part, but I talk more about Kyle in my other video, which you can go watch if you haven't yet. Getting back home did not solve or fix anything. As soon as she gets home, they're rushing right back to the ship for her father to die on the deck and quicken Vivacia, and she doesn't stay. She leaves in anger, frustration. She leaves the ship that she is bonded with. She leaves before her father's funeral is completed, and she is full of regret over this. She can't go back and fix it. It's over, it's done. She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. And she has some very hard lessons to learn. She thought she was so capable, but living as an unknown woman in the world is way different than living as the daughter of a well-respected family. And part of that is her gender. She has to hide her gender. No well-respecting ship is going to take a woman aboard, and that makes her so angry. I can understand that. Amber helped her, but she was pretty good at being a boy. She had lived on ship long enough to know how sailors talk and act and what's expected of a ship's boy. Robin Hobb doesn't shy away from the things about a woman's life that sometimes is pretended like don't exist. Sometimes you read a fictional work and you're like, well, what about this thing that has to be taken care of? And Robin Hobb is like, oh, well, this is what you would do. That makes it more realistic and more immersive, I think. And now she's on her first voyage without her family. But she learns some hard truths. Some of those hard truths are that in some ways Kyle was right about her. Being a privileged daughter on board ship is a lot different than being an actual sailor. She wasn't as competent as she thought she was, and what seems unfair really is that just her physical body wasn't as strong as a grown man. There were some tasks that were literally too hard for her, and that kinda sucks. Of the four women, though, Althea's story ends the happiest, at least in the first book. She is able to rely on herself. She goes on her voyage and makes it back alive with a whole new skill set, more confidence in herself. She gets the mate position on a live ship as herself with her own name on her way back home. She has high hopes for the future. She has no idea what's been going on with Vivacia this whole time, but she is able to look forward to what's coming next. She does leave Brashen a little awkwardly. It's been a long time since I read these. I do not remember what happens in the next book with Althea or Vivacia or Brashen or any of it. And now we get to Keffria. Still a young woman. She is the one that has a husband and children, and now she has the inheritance of the Vestrit family. She is the oldest, so inheriting was her right, and that could have been fine. She could have kept Althea on board the ship if things hadn't exploded between her husband and her sister. She passed her authority to Kyle, and he doesn't want Althea. She has never been a very authoritative or take charge kind of person. She's always been able to rely on her mom. She's never had to say, hey, we are doing this. She has always been happy to let her mom and her husband take care of things. For one, it was easier. When you're not the main decision maker, other people don't get mad at you for what happens. They get mad at the person who decides what's going to happen. Kefri is not the one who kicked Althea off the ship. Kyle did. And now at this point in her life, Kefria is used to sitting back and letting others decide. She is in the habit of doing the easy thing, and choosing to do the harder thing takes more personal gumption. One of the things that Kefria decides she is going to take over and have more of a hand in is raising her own daughter. I'll talk about Malta next, but Malta is at a really awkward and difficult age. Not a child, not a grown-up, and Kefria is seeing what path she could take if they don't rein her in. No 13-year-old wants to be reined in. There is a lot of friction now between Kefria and Malta and Ronica. Ronica is not used to letting go of the reins. She has a hard time believing Kefria will do a good job with Malta, but you know what? Kefria's the mom. She gets to decide, not Ronica. Kefria doesn't have a bunch of practice being in charge, but in some ways, I could see this as being Ronica's fault. She didn't put things into Kefria's hands to say, here, you do this, you be in charge of this. In some ways, she kind of trained Kefria to not have to be decisive. And Kefria confronts her about this. By Ronica not giving things to Kefria to be trusted with, Kefria felt a little bit disregarded. Like her mom didn't trust her, or like her mom maybe thought she wasn't smart enough to handle things. Here, let me do that for you, good daughter. And now Kefria is taking charge of what she has inherited. She's taking responsibility for it. I say, good for her. I like to see this growth in her. I like the character development of Kefria in this book. And as far as her relationship with Kyle, they had a much better relationship when Kyle wasn't in charge of anything either. Now that Kyle has some control, Kefria has seen some of the worst of him coming out. I cannot imagine being in Kefria's place, seeing how Kyle treated her oldest son. She also gets the feeling, which may be true, that Kyle doesn't really respect her authority. She did pass authority to him very quickly. That's not a good way to gain respect for your authority. He doesn't respect the decisions she wants to make. He always thought she was wrong for wanting to dedicate Wintro. The way he wants to spoil Malta while she is trying to raise Malta to be a good woman. She's kind of realizing that things are easier when he's not there. She's not super looking forward to him getting home. You know who is looking forward to him getting home? The one he spoils. Malta. Malta has become accustomed to being spoiled. She expects it to continue when her father returns. She expects her father to swoop in and rescue her from the oppression of her mother and grandmother. Oh, the frustrating thing about Malta is that I have known girls just like her. In some ways, I was like her. I used to be 12 and 13. I remember what it was like. Life feels so unfair. She feels so grown up. She knows she's not a little kid anymore. And in her mind, you're either a little kid or you're a grown up. She's not either one right now. She wants to be seen and treated as an adult. And people don't see her that way yet or treat her that way yet. It feels to her like her family is against her and kind of like they don't even care if she's happy. She definitely feels like they don't understand her. In some ways they don't. Ronica and Kefria have also been 12 and 13 years old before, but Kefria was a good and permissive and submissive daughter. Wintro is probably more like Kefria, and Malta is a lot more like Kyle. And the things that Malta wants in life are not unreasonable. She wants to be treated older and be respected. That will come with time. She wants to be noticed and courted by men. Again, later when she's a little older. These things that she wants are normal, but she's impatient and she doesn't want to wait for them. And so having her mother and grandmother tell her, hey, you're not old enough to do this, you need to wait, it feels to her like they're just holding her back and not letting her go free. They kind of are, because they love her and they have her best interests at heart and they know what it's like out there in the world. And she doesn't yet. She also has a hard time taking big picture stuff seriously, like with the dream box. To her, it was just a gift sent specially to her. It feels so special, it's magical. Her view on the gift is very narrow. All she can see is the present. She doesn't see all the other stuff that her mother and grandmother are telling her she needs to consider. And now that is going to have a big effect on her family. What that is, we won't know until the next book or even the next 2 books. And then the book ends in kind of a weird place. It feels like you just kind of have to read the next book to continue the story, which I intend to do. After this, check out my video on Kyle and Wintrow. Follow me on Instagram, my link for that's in the description, and subscribe here for fantasy bookish content like this. And I'll see you next time. Bye! In the second breathtaking volume of Robin Hobb's Liveship Traders Trilogy, hey, I said it without flubbing. It's because I was reading. Mad ship, mad ship.